we see quite a bit of volatility. One day we're down quite heavily, the next day we see a bit of a relief rally. With regards to the technicals, it seems that some should be taking a bit of a cautious approach to the markets. How are you playing the overall scenario, and do you think it's going to result in positivity or perhaps a bit more of a correction?
Well, I think if you take a look at some of the technicals that have come out on the Dow Jones and the S&P, they've both broken support lines just briefly yesterday, and I think people are taking that they might retest those lines, and there's a lot of a relief rally. A lot of the stocks were oversold, but I'll be very cautious here to start going long and start entering the market if I was a new investor. I'd like to wait and see for a week or two just to see if these support lines are going to hold. If they break down, we can see quite a big move to the downside in world markets.
With regards to some of the plays that you could be nitpicking at, I mean, we've got the likes of Anglo and Billiton because of the correction that we've seen in the commodity space as well. Some say that perhaps these stocks are offering a bit of value. Would you agree with that?
It's a difficult call. Obviously, you have to take a call on commodities going forward. Goldman Sachs today have upgraded and are a bit more bullish on commodities, and have also increased their target on oil. So up to $130 for the year. If you accept that, I think that you'll take a look at Billiton at these levels. Billiton looking relatively well priced. Secondly, you have to take a look at China. China's slowing down quite considerably, and you have to weigh the two up. Will China slow down enough to slow the world economy down? And if it doesn't, then I think the commodity shares are looking quite good. So we're at quite an interesting point in the markets now. I wouldn't say anything's totally cheap, but I would start to look slowly at maybe some of the big miners.
Quite interesting, Rob, because it really all depends on which side of the fence you're at. If you do think things are going to go quite well going forward, then you would buy into the commodities story. If not, then perhaps some time to sell out of these companies. But at the end of the day, when you see how commodities have been performing, we've seen a bit of a correction. That said, we've still got oil prices sitting at around $111 a barrel. What goes in terms of those industrial metals? Because we've seen a lot of volatility. What are you reading into this space?
Yes, well, you take a look at copper, and that's been very volatile recently, but still very high at the moment. And copper companies making a lot of money in the last year and a half. So I'll take a look at copper as my first indicator. If that copper price falls off aggressively in the next few months, it'll be a good sign that the world economy isn't recovering as well as everybody's looking at. And then I'll take that as my key. And then secondly, I'll look at the iron ore plays. But at the moment, it's still 50-50, and looking to see whether we can get some more growth out of the United States and China. Obviously, we've got the sovereign debt issues in Europe, which is also hampering the commodity prices at the moment.
But in the meantime, let's touch on some of the corporate news out in South Africa. The biggest focus today, in a sense, we've got Adcock that came out with some interesting numbers, revenue up 13%. We know that it's had a few worries and woes coming through with some of its drugs that it did have to pull out of the market, and that's having a negative impact. But looking at the overall space, a big focus on expansion in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes, I think they had to stop making the Synap 40, which is a very big drug for Adcock and did take quite a big knock. So if you take that out of the system, I think the numbers look relatively firm. I think they got quite a lot of cash, and the cash flush at the moment, and are looking to expand. And as you take a look at Walmart coming into South Africa, and why do they want to be here, is to expand into Africa. And I think Adcock also wanting to do that play into emerging Africa. I think they're looking at Mozambique, Angola, as well as into Nigeria. So looking for growth. The market in South Africa is a very good one, but the margins are very thin, and you can definitely get further bigger margins if you go into Africa. So looking to expand there, and we'll have to wait and see what purchase they go for.
Interesting, Rob. I mean, we've got Adcock up around 0.3% in midday trade so far. Would you be buying the stock at these levels, or would you wait to see what the strategy is going forward?
I think the highs of Adcock were around about 68 Rand to 70 Rand, so I think they have pulled back quite considerably. I would start to look at Adcock. They're quite defensive. If you're unsure about where commodities are moving at the moment, and some of the industrials, these are quite defensive stocks, Aspen and Adcock I would look to buy some. I think going forward they're looking quite solid.
We also had some numbers out of Stefanuti. 14% drop in full year headline earnings per share. The same story coming through for a lot of these construction companies. Delayed contract awards, cancellations, and margins being squeezed because of the competitive environment. Some contrarians out there feeling a bit brave are buying into the construction space, especially Stefanuti stocks. Would you get into the stock right now, or do you think it's a bit risky?
I think some of the long-term asset managers and some maybe even the pensions funds will start to buy and pick up stock here. They have to buy over a long period of time until they build a really good amount of shares in these companies. So maybe they are the really first early buyers at the moment. I think it's too early for the normal retail investor to be picking up these stocks. I think there are better stocks on the market at the moment where you could make a bit more money a little bit sooner. When the banks get knocked quite heavily, you see Standard Bank in the low 90s. I would rather buy something like that rather than one of the construction stocks.
Rob, we also know that the rand has been weakening over the past couple of trading sessions. You mentioned the Greek debt crisis, the debt worries coming through from Europe. This perhaps weighing on sentiment on emerging markets as a whole. Where to from here for the local currency? Where are you pegging the rand going forward?
I think it's very difficult to call the rand, but I think the current range is about 695 to about 705. I think it'll be very difficult to break 710 on the weaker side, and I think we can easily strengthen back down to 690 and even 680. I think if the market stabilises again, the carry trade is still trading, people are still putting money into South African bonds, and I think if the sovereign debt issues just settle out, you'll see money flow back into the bonds. I think the rand will strengthen from these levels.
Rob, with regards to the sovereign debt crisis that we keep talking about, it's interesting to note that the market had expected some kind of restructuring or defaults, especially from Greece. Why do you think that there is so much volatility at this point in time? We thought that this had, of course, been priced in a long time ago.
Well, I think it's possibly also Spain. The government have lost their elections, and people are worried that the austerity measures will not be put in place. Spain's a very big player. It's not got small numbers like Greece, which is only a few percent of the European GDP. So I think Spain is really the worry here, and I think that they're thinking it'll be contagion from the Greece issue if Greece did default, even though it was priced in on the Greek side. I think it will lead into problems in Spain, and Italy's also just been downgraded from stable to negative as well. So it's not just Greece. I think Europe as a whole is still under pressure again. We have the ash cloud coming through again in their summer season. If that did flow over into Europe and stop flights, I think it'll be problematic for GDP.